It's our responsibility as citizens to not only be informed about issues and candidates, but also to exercise our most important political right, voting. In the end, ignorance is a dangerous luxury that none of us can afford. So, get out there and vote. And the reason we have 4 candidates this morning is because Representative Dave Heaton is retiring after over 20 years of service to citizens of this district. Representative Heaton, who is here as an observer, not a candidate, deserves our gratitude for that service. You probably saw that he received a bipartisan standing ovation when he concluded his last committee meeting at the Capitol. If you follow politics at all lately, you know that it's not easy to get 2 political parties to agree to anything. So, when they stand together to show their appreciation, it's noteworthy. Thank you, Representative Heaton. So with that spirit of informed voters, these 4 candidates are essentially interviewing for the job of representing you all in Des Moines. This is a forum, not a debate, and the candidates are speaking directly to you, their constituents, and not to ITR. We're only here to facilitate a discussion so you all can learn what kind of legislator these candidates hope to be. So here are a few ground rules. Candidates will have a chance to briefly introduce themselves at the start of the event and also provide a brief closing statement at the end. Candidates were not provided any questions in advance, but we did send them the topics we plan to discuss. Some audience members submitted questions ahead of time, and some did so this morning. Some of those questions were already incorporated in the forum, and some we've tried to work in. We're going to limit the questions to fiscal issues or the role of government and regulation, with one notable exception that we'll start off with. If we don't cover your question or a topic you want to hear, all 4 candidates have said they're willing to stick around once we conclude and chat with you individually. Response time for the candidates will be limited to 1.5 minutes. Follow-up questions may be asked at our discretion. There's no formal rebuttals of the candidates. Again, forum, not a debate. And we're going to rotate the order in which we ask the questions. Other than that, let's begin. I got our team out of bed at probably before 5 today for each of us to get down here, so I should introduce them. I think most of you met Dan and Ernie when you walked in. My colleague John Hendrickson is not only moderating this forum today, but he's also a former and longtime Mount Pleasant resident. So many of you probably know John, or maybe he's friends. That's right. So John is going to drive the rest of the way.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to the candidates. Our first question this morning is just tell us who you are and why you're running for House District 84, and we'll start with Joe Mitchell.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Joe Mitchell. I'm from Wayland, Iowa. I'm a graduate of Lakeville High School. I'm currently a student at Drake University in Des Moines, acquiring my bachelor's degree in business administration, which I'll have in December. And I really am thankful to have this opportunity to run and potentially represent the great people of House District 84. And I really have a passion for serving others as I've worked up at the Capitol in Des Moines for the last 4 years, working in the State House, the State Senate, for Governor Reynolds, and for Senator Ernst. These experiences have allowed me to learn the process and understand how to get things done in Des Moines. I plan on using these past experiences in government to help pass through legislation that will help rural Iowans. As a legislator, I would like to pass legislation that only helps for big metro areas in Iowa, but our rural Iowas, or rural areas. And if there's any sign that any legislation being passed is not going to help our southeastern Iowans down here, I have no problem voting no on the bill. Being up in Des Moines the past 4 years, I've seen good legislation get passed, bad legislation get passed. And because of people voting along party lines. Bills that have been hurt, there have been bills that hurt folks in rural Iowa because of leadership telling them that was the right way to vote, and I'm not here to be a poster child for any party. And the 2 underlying reasons why I'm really running is because, number one, after being in the Capitol for the past 4 years, I've seen Representative Heaton fight every day for the people down here in Southeast Iowa, and it's really inspired me to want to run and help people too down here. And number two, growing up, I saw my dad start a business and work really hard and achieve kind of the American dream and have success in his business. I want to make sure every Iowans who want to do the same thing work just as hard and have the same opportunity to do that. So
Thank you. Sheila Matheney.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Not very well.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My voice is not as deep as yours, Joe. Well, hi, everyone. I am Sheila Matheney. A little bit about myself. I have lived here in Mount Pleasant for about 16 years. I am married to Brian Matheney. I have 2 children, Jordan, who is 18, and Nicholas, who is 13. I have a Bachelor of Health Sciences and a Master of Health Sciences from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Iowa's no fooey, but that's where I'm from. We currently own a long-term care healthcare company in Mount Pleasant, as well as a property rental company. And we currently employ 85 people, mostly in this district, and are responsible for a payroll of over $2 million for people in this district. So why am I running? Well, first of all, politics was not an aspiration for me. I'm not a politician, but have always been interested in politics. And when Dave decided that he was going to retire in January and made that announcement, I jokingly said, well, maybe I should just run for the seat. And a couple weeks later, Ryan came to me and said, you know, I think you might be good at it. I think you should look into it. So I talked to some local business people, and I talked to some people that kind of knew what was what around the state, and I got a lot of encouragement and support to do it. So I decided at the middle of March, kind of at the last minute, to throw my hat into the ring. You know, I think that this district has been really lucky in the last, what's Dave been here, 24 years. He's been a really strong leader for our district and strong support for our district. And I think that some of his qualities was that he was always open to the people and a good listener. And I think that I am somebody that can carry that forward. So I am almost 50 years old. So I feel like that brings me a lot of real world experience.
I'm sorry, Sheila, the time has expired. Trevor Lynn.
Well, thank you. I'm Trevor Lynn. I'm running for the Republican candidate for House District 84. I am from Brighton. I have grown up in Brighton for my entire life, where my family operates a small farm. I graduated from Waco in 2015 and now attend Iowa State University as a political science major. My original intent was to go overseas and serve as a diplomat or an aide or some capacity overseas to help Americans in trouble overseas. So I currently work alongside my father, Lynn Painting, his own small business. I also currently serve as secretary for the Washington County Central Republican Committee. I've been on that committee since 2015. Also in 2015, I was appointed by Governor Branstad to the Juvenile Justice Advisory Council and was elected to the committee at the same time. This past legislative session, I worked under Senator Mark Children. I've also worked at Best Buy, Pizza Ranch, and as a page in the House of Representatives. I'm running for District 84 because I want to be a voice for middle-class families, a protector of the Constitution, an advocate for farmers. I want to create a better state to pass on to the next generation. We've accomplished some big things within the past couple of years. I want to see us protect those accomplishments, build upon them, and create a better state for everyone overall by first listening to the community, listening to their concerns, their goals, and taking those with us to Des Moines to make sure what you guys want gets done.
Thank you.
I'm Martin Amos. I'm a 5th generation Iowan. Grew up in Mount Pleasant. Went through the Mount Pleasant Community Schools. Went on to Ames and went to Iowa State. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Restaurant Management. From there, I moved to Dallas for a while and was a kitchen manager, bakery manager, manager trainer, and at the corporate level, even a manager, a corporate troubleshooter. They say, we got a problem, find it, fix it. And when my wife was pregnant, we moved back to Mount Pleasant to be closer to the grandparents. Nancy and I have been married 35 years now. And then I got into wholesaling food to restaurants. Gave me the worst route in the state. I built it to the best in a couple of years. They moved me on to manager of Eastern Iowa, then throughout the whole state of Iowa. And then after a merger and acquisition, sent me up to Minnesota to run the wholesales and distribution division up there. And after about 20 years, we moved back, had enough of that, and bought a semi. I'm semi-retired. And so I am a business owner. I have a contract with an outfit up in Minnesota and delivering the same product that I used to sell. As a business owner, I deal with tax issues, regulations, both in the food and transportation industry. And fund my own retirement, fund my own health insurance. So I'm pretty much doing it without government assistance. And with that, in fact, any proceeds besides living expenses, I do.
I'm sorry, the time has expired. We're going to move on to policy questions now, and we'll start with Martin Amos on this question, and then we'll just go down. Mount Pleasant recently made the headlines when 32 immigrants were detained at a local business. An anti-sanctuary city bill was passed by the legislature this session. How do you view that sanctuary cities law and immigration issues at the state level?
So immigration is a federal issue, and so the state had to pass a law banning sanctuary cities because that would put our state and cities in jeopardy, because those are any state or city that makes a sanctuary law becomes unlawful on a federal jurisdiction.
Trevor Lynn.
So I currently support the sanctuary city bill. I'm not a big fan of interfering in federal law. We need to let federal law run its course and adhere to it because we are subordinate to the federal level. And again, it is the federal jurisdiction issue, so all decisions that are being made about immigration, that's Congress, or Congressman, Senator, the President. The state can't do a whole bunch with immigration besides enacting sanctuary city laws.
Sheila Matheney.
So I want to start by saying that I think that there's a lot of people in Mount Pleasant that have a lot of compassion for what happened this week, not only for the immigrant families, but also for the Malay family that got caught up in that situation. But it is my belief that there are laws in this country, and the law in this country says that there's a right way to come into this country and there's a wrong way to come into this country. And I think it's unfortunate that the federal government hasn't done its job in securing our borders, so it puts a lot of people in a bad position. But at the end of the day, the law is the law, and if people want to change that law, there's a process to do that. And I think that's a bigger discussion that can be had, but as of right now, the law is the law.
Joe Mitchell.
Yeah, I think everyone here just said it right. We have laws in this country, and but the thing is, it is a federal issue, and there's not much we can do about it in the state level. And the Sanctuary Cities Bill is about the only thing we have jurisdiction over to comply with federal law. And,
Thank you. Our next question will be directed at Martin Amos and Trevor Lynn. The topic is tax reform. The Iowa legislature just passed our first state income and corporate tax reform package in 20 years. Talk about how this new tax code can benefit Iowa.
Sure. I'm glad something was passed. I don't think it goes far enough, and so if I were elected, I would push for even deeper tax cuts. I just got turned off. There we go. And anyways, however, when you reduce taxes and you reduce regulations, that spurs economic opportunity. So often the argument from the other side is that it reduces revenues, but when you increase economic activity, businesses are hiring more people, you have a bigger tax base and you actually grow revenues.
Thank you. Trevor Lynn.
So I support what came out of Des Moines this past legislative session. I think the tax bill we have will be a nice companion to the federal tax bill that was just passed recently. This tax bill is going to benefit middle-class families, working-class families, and your higher classes. You're going to drop the corporate, we still need to do some reform with the corporate tax rate and look more at businesses. I think this is a good start because it allows more of your money to stay in your pocket, so then you can reinvest in the community, in your business, in your family, in your education, healthcare, wherever it may be, because you guys have everybody has anything can come up. Your child can be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, you need some fallback money. So anything we can do at the governmental level to allow you to have more money as cushion is a good process, and it's a good thing for Iowans.
The next question is for Sheila Matheney and Joe Mitchell. We'll start with Sheila. What additional income tax reforms should be enacted in the future? What improvements could be made to the legislation referring to the recent tax reform bill passed?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I also support the bill. I think there's a lot of good things in the bill, and I think that the legislature was responsible to put it over, to have it over a 6-year plan, and I think that there's a lot of stopgaps in the bill to protect having to roll back some other items if tax cuts, are not able to be funded. As far as I haven't really read the whole nuts and bolts of the bill, so to tell you specifically what else I would do, I can't specifically say that at this point, but I think anytime that you can give a taxpayer, I'm a taxpayer, anytime you can give a taxpayer back their own money to spend as they wish, I think it only is going to go both for revenue to the state.
Joe Mitchell.
Yeah, so the current tax plan that they passed, obviously I also support. It's not going to be fully implemented until 2023, so we have a few years here to see how it plays out and see how it stirs economic growth in the state, which I think it will. I think it's kind of a waiting game right now to see how it plays out and make sure we get enough revenue coming into the state, but the end goal would be to try to get a tax format like Texas has, or South Dakota, or some of the states that really have super low income taxes, no income taxes at all, and get revenue from different sources of taxes. So,
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to healthcare, and we'll start with Trevor Lynn and then Sheila Matheney. Trevor, is the privatization of Medicaid working in Iowa?
So I've had a lot of people from former residents of the MHI, the Mental Health Institute that closed down, and I've heard horror stories about it. I think the feeling up in Des Moines is that, it had good intentions. They tried it out and realized there were more bumps in the road than expected. And from what I've heard up there, there's not much support for privatization anymore. I could be wrong, though. I was just the secretary. My personal opinion is we need to step away from it. Still keep some privatization in there, but it involve more oversight and see if we can't do something to fix certain situations where people fall through the cracks. I mean, these MCOs, they can reject people if you're not making your monthly bills or any payments. And I've had one woman contact me with their horror story about what they went through and did to her 34-year-old daughter with schizophrenia. And I just won't stand for leaving people, especially with mental health issues, out to hang in the dust. And we need to have their back. We need to let them have the opportunity to live a good quality life.
Sheila?
So I've had a lot of personal experience with the MCO process, given the business that I'm in. So would I say that the MCO process is working efficiently and effectively for Iowa at this point? The answer to that, I think, would be no. Is there a pathway for it to be turned around and to be to meet the goals I think the legislature had in mind of cost reduction plus good quality care services? I think that process can be done. I think that it needs to be funded a little more strongly. I think one of the keys is stability in the marketplace for both consumers and providers. Companies dropping out at the last minute, changing case managers, changing how the process works, kind of, with a month's notice is difficult for providers, it's difficult for people receiving healthcare. And, I think one of the positive things about the MCO process is it really promotes wellness. And wellness is the key to effective healthcare and cost in reducing healthcare. So I think that this is an issue that's both a Democrat and a Republican issue, and I think with some common ground from both parties, the situation can be solved, and it's one of the primary reasons I'm running.
We're going to stick on healthcare, and our next questions for Joe Mitchell and Martin Amos. We'll start with Joe. Are there any changes that need to be made to mental health care delivery in Iowa?
I think as we've seen this healthcare bill just get passed in the legislature this year, and they increased the number of beds and regulations so people can get through faster and they're not held up there as long as they need to be. But I think creating as many access centers as possible, is a key thing. And with the regionalization of the whole mental health care thing, talking to our county supervisors, what they said was, they weren't 100% for the regionalization of it, but since it's been implemented, they're coming more towards the idea and they like it more and more. And so, I think it's an ongoing issue that we need to keep working on. But
Martin?
So speaking to individuals that are connected with mental health issues, one of the biggest complaints I hear is access to evaluators to determine whether they're competent or not competent, especially if they've been arrested. And so they may have to travel as far as Davenport or Des Moines or even Council Bluffs or Sioux City. And so to have more and local evaluators would help reduce costs, because it costs money to send officers to transport these guys these long distance, as well as tying up not only their time, but the time of the vehicle and the cost to run up there and stuff.
Thank you. Our next topic is going to be education, and we'll start with Sheila Matheney and then Martin Amos. Education spending is the largest part of the state's budget. How can the legislature work to improve K-12 education in Iowa? How do you view the state's funding of education?
Well, this was one of the most interesting discoveries I made after starting to run for office when looking at state budgets. It was striking to me of the lack of parity between K-12 education and higher education funding. I believe that those budgets, I think there should be some reduction in higher education, and the public schools need to be funded at a stronger pace. K-12 education is important. Research shows that by the third grade, if you don't have your basic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic, you're not, you don't have the basis to go on to a secondary school, be it technical or higher education. So I think that's the K-12 education and the funding of that is a priority.
Martin Amos.
So I have a little different view on education. In the private sector, you have to perform and achieve to experience results. And that will come in the form of either higher profits or growing your business. Same with individuals. They either earn a promotion, raises, or bonuses. We don't require that out of education. The argument from the educators are usually, give us more money and then we'll give you results. And for years they've been telling that ever since I was a kid. they've been saying that. And I know that the citizens here would be very generous in supporting results-oriented education. And the proof of that is people sending their kids to private schools and paying that extra to send them to private schools to get that better education and still continuing to pay their property taxes to support local schools.
Thank you. Sticking with education, we'll turn to Trevor Lynn and Joe Mitchell. Do you believe Iowa has enough school choice options currently, or would additional programs like education savings accounts or similar items be helpful for K through 12 education?
So I think Iowa does a great job with education. The real important sector of education for me is our small rural school districts coming from Waco. And I think we need to allow our small school districts and larger school districts to be more innovative and have more self-control. Because we can do great things when we trust our community leaders, trust the school board, and let them have a run with it. And Waco was looking at closing down, they're able to be innovative, and now we're a booming community once again. Now, I think competition is good, private schools, and parents who can afford to send their kids there and who want to send their kids there, they have a place too, and they can provide good competition to the public schools. So it'll help all of Iowa's children in the future. But I don't think tax dollars should be spent on public goods. I would support maybe a percentage of tax dollars going to education savings grants or other type of programs, but I want to be careful with spending a large proportion of their taxpayer dollars to go to private schools. I think the majority of them should go to public schools and public education.
Thank you. Joe Mitchell?
I think for this district, funding public education should be the #1 thing, since we have so many rural schools that are public schools. And I think what the problem is with the school aid formula right now that was created 40, 50 years back, is that each school, whether it's in Des Moines or down here in rural Iowa, gets the same amount per kid. Some are between like $5,500. And the problem with that is that our rural schools down here, we expend so much more on transportation for our kids than up in the urban areas like Des Moines. And so we're spending more on transportation for our kids than in the classroom. And so I think we need to focus on making sure our rural schools are funded and our public schools aren't.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn to concerns of rural Iowa. This will be addressed to Martin Amos and Trevor Lynn. While Iowa has many industries to be proud of, our identity will always be tied to our agricultural roots. What's the greatest challenge facing rural Iowa?
I think the greatest challenge facing rural Iowa is it's hard to pinpoint this. I think one of the greatest challenges is large-scale operations and small-scale operations working together. And there seems to be more of an adversarial relationship going on. And some of the large-scale operations are homegrown, but some are from out of state that have really no interest in Iowa, but because we have the farmland and it's cheap comparatively to some of these states out east or west, they're taking quite a bit of advantage of that. And so they don't have the same interest in taking care of the land, the water quality, etc., as say a homegrown large operation does. So I'd say that's probably one of our biggest problems right now.
Trevor?
So I'm proud to say I've come from a small community, a small rural family, and I've seen any of these issues firsthand in our own community. I'd like to start first for starting out families who may are coming from Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, who want to move to a small community, maybe start their own small farming. Land prices are expensive. Most of those are sold at auctions, so not only do you have to compete for yourself and come up with whatever amount of money for however much land you want, but you also have to compete with the big hog confinement owners, the big turkey confinement owners, the big crop farmers. It's hard for families to come out here, want to build a house and start their own little farm. Another thing is infrastructure out in the rural communities, even gravel roads. Some of them are just not getting the funding and the maintenance that they need to keep up. This is a big concern to southern Washington County. Abe Miller, who's a district supervisor or county supervisor up there, has talked to me numerous times about the wear and tear on the gravel roads from the large farming equipment, and there's just not enough money to go around. You know, the federal government promises the state money, the state promises the county money. Well, then something goes wary along the lines, and people don't get the money that they need. Rural growth and farming practicing clash some. You know, like Mark said, you got your large confinement farmers, and then you got your smaller farmers. We need to just bring them to the table, sit down, have a civilized discussion, and figure what's best.
Thank you. We're going to stick with rural Iowa. The next question's for Sheila Matheney and Joe Mitchell. Iowa faces a demographic problem with very slow population growth. How can the legislature work to create opportunities that keep younger people in Iowa and attract additional people to our state? Sheila?
So as I see it as living here, for the last 16 years, I think that a few of the things that rural Iowa faces as challenges would be access to local health care, adequate housing, jobs, and infrastructure. I think that housing is huge in the quality of the public school system, especially in our district, would be huge for being able to recruit good workers for good middle class jobs. So I think housing is a big thing, and then also I think in this district there's a lot of small businesses, and the encouragement of small businesses and some of the tax relief I think that small businesses are going to get, and some of the healthcare issues that I think will change in the next few years will be a good draw for people to create small business here in Iowa, and I think that really draws younger people.
Thank you. Joe Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why I'm running is because to be an example of somebody who, grew up in this community, went to Des Moines, got my degree, now I'm coming back, to show people that, it's okay to come back to your community and help them out and, be involved. And secondly, I think that another huge thing for young people is just making sure we have a vibrant community here in Mount Pleasant. And I think one of the ways to do that is to keep the historic tax credit going. What that can do is it's renovated a lot of stuff on Town Square, and making sure we have stuff to do for young people, and that they want to come back, and that they can have a nice place to live and enjoy life, and then making sure we have the housing for workers, affordable housing, and so making sure we're keeping the housing credit also, so we can build affordable housing for folks.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch gears now to property taxes. We'll start with Trevor Lynn and Sheila Matheney. Trevor, many Iowans have seen increases in their property tax bills in recent years. Is there anything the legislature can do to provide property tax relief?
Yeah, so my own family has seen our property taxes skyrocket. We have a 3-acre yard, then we have a whole bunch of farmland too. I think one thing that the legislature can do is look at this through the eyes of the middle class family, the property owner, and realize, hey, they're being taxed at the federal level, the state level, the county level, the school board level, your city, state taxes. If you live in a housing development, you have those dues. We need to take smart, effective cuts, tone back, decide what's needed instead of wants, fund the needs, not the wants, and decide, maybe if we can give them a 5% cut in property taxes or some number. If we can afford, just by giving them the cut by cutting a program that's no longer efficient and does not benefit the public good.
Sheila, is there anything the legislature can do to provide property tax relief?
So, property taxes are paid both on a personal level and a commercial level. So, on a private level, really the only thing that you're gonna do to reduce property taxes is to reduce spending. So it's, if you're willing to make the spending cuts and where those spending cuts are gonna be made. I do think that, the legislature 4 years ago, did a strong commercial property tax rollback that I think is helping a lot of small business. I think, and especially in Mount Pleasant and in this district, I know, that there's a lot of people that are owning, and small businesses that own commercial property that were taxed at 100% of the assessed value. It's slowly being rolled back over 10 years, and I think that that has proven to be a successful program.
Thank you. We're going to remain on property taxes. This question will be directed to both Joe Mitchell and Martin Amos. We'll start with Joe. The state spends $152 million on backfilling local governments after the 2013 commercial and industrial property tax reform. Do you believe the backfill should continue?
Yeah, so the deal with the backfill is, and they were supposed to stop it this year and they didn't because local governments were saying, if we stop at this backfill, then we're going to raise our local property taxes. And so, I think it's a thing where we keep kicking the can down the road and, there needs to be a solution figured out, and I don't know the solution right now to fix the backfill problem. But it seems like, as conservatives, we always want to, cut spending, cut taxes. But it seems like we always cut taxes first, and then the spending comes later, but it never actually comes later because we never want to cut anything. So I think we need to, first of all, before we do any tax cuts, always make sure, we have the revenue coming in the short term, and making sure we're not getting budget crunches with the state.
Thank you. Martin Amos?
So, before running, actually, before yesterday, I hadn't even heard of the term backfill. So I'm going to play ignorant on that one and just talk a little bit about more about what the state can do or what we can do to help reduce property taxes. And one of the big problems is Des Moines has a habit of making some mandates that are unfunded. And then the counties or the local district has to come up with the funds to meet those mandates. And that kind of practice, if we halted that, would help reduce property taxes as well.
Thank you. Our next topic is going to be water quality. We'll start with Trevor Lynn and Martin Amos. Trevor, Governor Reynolds signed into law a water quality legislation that commits long-term dedicated funding, $282 million over 12 years, to conservation and water quality improvements. How do you characterize Iowa's water quality needs and this new legislation?
So I think this legislation was a good start. A lot of the Democrats said it wasn't strict enough, it didn't go after enough. Well, you have to start somewhere. And Iowa's a tough place to start with water quality when you have so many factories out by the Mississippi River, when you have all the large farming operations here in Henry County and Washington County. So I think it's a good start. We have to start holding people accountable, but at the same time not placing too much regulations where they can't conduct their own business. We want to be a business-friendly state, so we have to act that way. So you have to find a happy middle ground between business regulations and still water quality, and I think we found it. I think the bill was a good start.
Martin Amos?
Yes, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Governor Reynolds signed into law water quality legislation that commits long-term dedicated funding to conservation and water quality improvements. How do you characterize Iowa's water quality needs and this new legislation?
Okay, so I know that's a big concern for a lot of people, that the quality of our water is either inadequate or needs improvement, or they're worried about the fallout with these large operations and stuff. And I know not only Governor Reynolds, but the administration is very committed to improving that. And again, what Trevor said is right. We're trying to make that balance, because sometimes what the government wants isn't realistic either to meet those goals. If we encourage technology, that kind of stuff, that also helps improve our quality of life, regardless of whether it's water quality, etc.
Thank you. We're going to stick with water quality, and now we'll direct these questions to Joe Mitchell and then Sheila Matheney. We'll start with Joe. Should future legislatures consider taking additional steps to address water quality by implementing the 3/8 of a cent sales tax increase to fund the Natural Resources and Recreational Trust Fund?
So I'm just gonna be honest, I don't know enough about how much we should tax to help out water quality. I know that this current bill they just passed, though, provides an estimated $282 million for water quality over the next 12 years, which I also think is a good start to it. But whenever we pass any water quality bills, I think we should be cautious of for putting any regulations on farmers if that's gonna hurt them and hurt the revenue growth, and making sure we're thinking about them also when we're passing these water quality bills.
Sheila Matheney, should the legislature take additional steps to address water quality by implementing the 3/8 of a cent sales tax increase to fund the Natural Resources and Recreational Trust Fund?
So I think, water quality obviously is important to everybody sitting here in this room and everybody in the district, but I think the state taking a measured approach and allocating the $282 million, it's my understanding that they're going to do something like 19 site projects to look at are the initiatives that are put in this bill going to work, and are they going to actually reduce the phosphorus and nitrogen like they think it's going to, and will the avenues that they're advocating to make this a good funding, isn't going to work. And so I think starting on the small level that they're starting at, and if it turns out to be a positive thing and it works the way they think it's going to, then I think that you can look at how you're going to fund it. I'm not sure that I would vote for raising the tax, but I think that they're using some sales tax now that we're already paying on a water bill. And I think that that's fine for the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question now that was submitted by an audience member, and this will be directed to Martin Amos and Sheila Matheney. We'll start with Martin. IPERS is the largest public pension plan for state government employees in Iowa. Do you think that IPERS should be reformed, replaced, or left alone?
Well, that's a loaded question. IPERS is a very good program. It's working well. Those that have been promised it should be able to keep it. Now, as a general rule, because I do self-fund my own retirement, that I believe that's the best way to fund retirement. We have Social Security, and we have people that say that I've been hearing that, hey, why do the state workers get this special thing and Social Security is so good? So there's a conflict there that runs between state employees and individuals. It needs to be looked at because they're running a deficit, and we don't want to be caught short, because we could end up in a situation like Illinois has, where they can't even raise taxes enough, and it's just beyond solving here. So it does need to be looked at, and to make sure that we're it's solid. Is the word I'm looking for.
Sheila Matheney, should IPERS be reformed, replaced, or left alone?
Well, I'm going to run the risk of probably being in trouble with a few of my family members around this subject. I will start by saying that, IPERS, I think, definitely has its place. do I and a lot of people feel that probably there were some overpromises that were made and it was a little strongly funded? I do. I think there have been some reforms that have come over the past few years that has rolled back some of those benefits, but I also do believe that people that are now retired or close to retirement and were promised the benefits they were promised, that the state needs to honor the commitments that they made to those people. But do I think that it can use some reform and some rollback? Yes, I do.
Thank you. Another audience submitted question, and this is for both Joe Mitchell and Trevor Lynn. We'll start with Joe. Animal agriculture, poultry, swine, beef, and dairy is a huge industry in Iowa and is important to rural areas. Do you believe additional regulations are needed regarding confinements?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think more regulations will just hurt our farmers and the profits they can bring in to take care of the families and everything else. And so at the moment, no, I want to be for any additional regulations.
Trevor Lynn.
So this topic has come up in our community in between Brighton and Wayland multiple times. My heart goes out to people who are anti-hog confinement. I understand why. Most of them don't like the smell. It's not old-fashioned. It's not how it used to be ran. However, I think now we have become reliant on them. They're necessary now if we want to keep producing the same amount of agricultural goods that we have been producing, if we want to fund our agricultural sector and all of our exports. And the bottom line is families rely on these operations. Whole families, communities. I know Iowa Burgers in Wayland employs hundreds of people in that community. If you just take it all away or place excessive regulations on, well then he's going to go elsewhere. That whole community will eventually drive up. So we have to look at it from the bigger picture of family members relying on it. Excuse me. And also whole communities that also rely on our farming practices.
Thank you. Our next question is we'll start with Martin Amos and then Sheila Matheney. This one is going back to the issue of tax reform. The tax reform legislation also calls for a more strenuous review of Iowa's business tax credits. Some believe business credits are a valuable part of Iowa's tax code, while others view those same credits as corporate welfare. How do you view business tax credits?
That's a good question. In a perfect world, we wouldn't even have an income tax and a corporate income tax. And so, because we have such a high corporate income tax, then we got to play the games of the tax credits, the games to entice business to do business in Iowa. And personally, I don't like the games, So I'm for reducing our corporate taxes to a minuscule amount, if not eliminating them. And then we, in turn, could get rid of these tax credits as well. Now, because if the business is taking the risk to be successful and make a profit, then they will reap that reward. And so if it makes business sense, they'll do it, regardless of whether there's the tax credit or not.
Thank you. Sheila Matheney, how do you view business tax credits?
So I look at the tax credits as used for a business to be incentivized to do something else they wouldn't normally do. So I think the important thing to look at with a tax credit is what's the end goal? So does it create a necessary job that's going to bring revenue back? Does it create a product that's going to bring revenue back? And I think you could look at it as an upfront investment for a return on investment. That being said, I think that they need to be finite. I think they need to be spelled out specifically. And I don't think they need to be going on and on and on. I think it's a good step for research and development for new companies that are starting up that maybe wouldn't normally do that or have the resources to do it. And so I think you could look at, upfront tax credit to help them get started and then roll that back and let a small business or a company then, be on their own.
Thank you. We're going to remain on tax reform, and we'll start with Trevor Lynn and then Joe Mitchell. This is another audience-submitted question. Why do you think Iowa has some of the highest tax rates? Why do we still have so many needs and unmet needs?
So I think Iowa has one of the highest tax rates in the nation in several areas because we've lost our way in Des Moines in the past. When you look right here, we're the second highest individual income tax rate, 8.5. That's in the nation. That's out of 50 states. You know, if we want Iowa to be a state that people come to, we want Iowa to have a bright future, then it's simple. We need to lower taxes so that people see a reason to come here. I think another reason why we're losing people is because young people like me see the high tax rate. You know, they go and get an education too at Iowa State or University of Iowa or in some fields that they don't see a huge potential here in Iowa, so they migrate away. So I think we want to keep people here. We have to lower the tax rate. We have to get smart about it too and make cuts of programs that are outdated, ineffective, not helping people. Planned Parenthood and their agenda, that would be a good way to start. Is they don't, abortion is not a public good that Planned Parenthood puts out there. So I think once we start making smart, effective cuts, then we can see more of our needs being fit.
Thank you. Joe Mitchell, Iowa has some of the highest tax rates, but yet we still have a lot of needs and unmet needs.
Yeah, so I think the issue was in the last, past 10, 20 years when all the other states in the country were lowering the tax rates, then we didn't do anything about it. And we had a legislator where it was, split party controlled. And, we had a party in there who didn't want to lower taxes on anything, and they just wanted to keep spending money. And the only way to do that is to not lower taxes and to raise taxes. And so I think this past legislator has done a great job with passing this new tax reform bill and setting a precedent, and I hope we can carry that tradition on.
Thank you. Our next question is for Sheila Matheney and Trevor Lynn. We'll start with Sheila. Do you believe the legislature should raise taxes on sugary drinks, beer, or tobacco products, sometimes there is called sin taxes, in an effort to raise more revenues to fund health and safety initiatives?
So I do not. I feel like people have the right to, whether it's good for them or bad for them, they have their right and the freedom of choice to, eat, drink, what they want to. And I think that trying to control people's choices by taxing them is not the right direction.
Thank you. Trevor Lynn, sin taxes?
Yes, so I agree with Sheila. Absolutely not. It's beyond silly. Why doesn't government trust the individual to make their own choices for them? I don't care if you go out and smoke a pack of cigarettes a day or want to go late at night and drink your 32-ounce Pepsi. I do that. Yeah, we should just have the right, the option to do that without being punished by the government for making unhealthy decisions that they deem unhealthy. It may be, but it's your life. Let you live it. Let's stop these silly taxes on the individual and let you make your own decisions yourself.
Thank you. We're going to move to healthcare and start with Joe Mitchell and then Martin Amos. Health and Human Services is the second largest appropriation and one of the fastest growing parts of the state budget. Many factors impact healthcare delivery. What can the legislature do to improve overall healthcare quality and affordability to all Iowans?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, concerning the Medicaid issue we have and with the managed care and the privatization of it, we just need to bring in more providers, and I know the governor's office is working on bringing in more providers, because the more providers we bring in, it creates competition, it lowers costs for consumers, and and then we can give better quality care too. So I think that's the short answer.
Okay, Martin Amos. Health and Human Services, the second largest appropriation and one of the fastest growing parts of the budget. What can the legislature do to improve overall healthcare quality and affordability to all Iowans?
Yeah, so healthcare costs have risen quite a bit more and faster than inflation has. In fact, it helps drive the inflation numbers. There's not enough market factors injected into the healthcare market and stuff. So one of the things, and Joe alluded to this, is more providers as far as the Medicaid privatization. That's something I've been speaking to as well. And because right now it's a state-sanctioned monopoly, they determine how many come in. Where if we just opened it up, and their job as a state is to regulate and not determine who's the winners and not. So competition now, this hits home for me because having paid my own healthcare costs or insurance costs because of Obamacare, I've seen them quadruple in 4 years from $300 a month to $1,200 a month, going up to $1,600 a month. That's more than most home payments, mortgage payments, and my deductible going from $5,000 to $10,000 a person. You know. I'm just gonna leave.
Okay, thank you. Remaining on healthcare, our next question for Joe Mitchell and Sheila Matheney. We'll start with Joe. What do you think about the recently passed legislation that allows giving small employers the ability to band together to create affordable healthcare options, and it also allows Farm Bureau to build a self-funded health benefit arrangement?
Yeah, so this is one of my actual favorite bills that passed in the legislature this year. I think it was a great idea because with the Obamacare regulations on healthcare, it was super hard for especially like small operation farmers to be able to afford their own healthcare for themselves, and so this bill did is let the people who are members of the Farm Bureau purchase these affordable healthcare plans and do stuff that's right for them and their family.
Sheila, what do you think about the recently passed legislation that allows giving small employers the ability to band together to create affordable health care options, while at the same time allowing the Farm Bureau to build a self-funded health benefit arrangement?
So if I had the previous question, that would have exactly been my answer. Besides the answer that, for the HHS committee, I think you should have left me and put me back on the committee, so knowing my answer for that. But health savings benefit plans, are allowing people to, employers to get out of the exchanges and go back into the private market. And I think that when you look at Wellmark and Farm Bureau, they have partnered in the past, and I think did up until 2014 when all of the plans were outlawed that weren't ACA compliant. So I think the ability for people to go back to the prior ACA plans, to be able to pick their own health care, pick their own premiums, and decide what is best for them at a lower cost is just a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Our next topic will be education. We'll start with Trevor Lynn and then Martin Amos. While Iowa has one of the best high school graduation rates in the country, the aforementioned workforce skill gap remains. What role should our secondary education programs play in addressing the workforce gap?
So first I want to start in our high schools and public schools. When Waco went 4+1, we allowed college classes to become available for students. CNA classes were available, and also a welding class for people wanting to go into a welding field. And I think they had 5 or 7 kids in the grade above me, which that grade was probably 19. Those kids went out and they got their welding certificates, and it's been really beneficial to them. So I'd like to see small school districts given the power to be innovative and to create some programs, team up with their community colleges, and get kids graduated with welding certificates or maybe a carpentry certificate in high school so they can go out into the job field in a skill and have a edge up on the competition. We also need to have more encouragement towards 2-year college education and skill trade. I work in the blue collar industry. I'm a painter. One of the things is that we can't find anybody who wants to work for us because it's a blue collar field. You know, everybody gets their college education, then they want to go off into Des Moines, Iowa City, a big city, and find a job in their fields. We need to encourage some blue collar field work and skilled trades.
Martin, Amos, what role should our secondary education programs play in addressing the workforce skills gap?
Sure. So when it comes to education, and if we give them a good foundation and all the basics and stuff, then regardless of what point in their life they are in, they take those fundamental skills. Say if a factory closes after 10 years, if they've been working there, or they change professions to a different type of work or whatever, those lifelong skills will carry them throughout. So we don't have to, quote unquote, specialize certain ways or not. Those things are available, and if they have those kind of interests, because if you look at blue collar jobs, they're very scientific and specialized anymore. They're not for the backyard mechanic. And but then there's those that the classes are holding them back because they are so smart that we have quote unquote honors programs to advance them, and that's all in good, but those should be the standards we should be expecting out of everyone, and then the honors would be even better. I look at my grandpa with an 8th grade education who could outread and outspeak anybody that's graduated today.
Thank you. This will be our last policy question, then we'll move to our final question this morning. This last policy question will be directed to Sheila Matheney and Joe Mitchell. Sheila, you have already addressed this a little bit, but do you think the legislature allocates too much or too little to Regent universities and our community college system?
Well, so I'm going to first start off with full disclosure. I am a product of a public school and a public university. However, I do think that the Iowa Board of Regents has a reputation of being somewhat dysfunctional in its policymaking and in its fiscal responsibility. And so I do believe that a reduction of higher education is in order if we're going to support the basic K-12 system.
Yes, Joe Mitchell is next. Do you think the legislature allocates too much or too little to Regent universities and the state community college system?
Yeah, I'm just gonna be honest. I think the Board of Regents, I think their spending is out of control. And I think we allocate millions and millions of dollars to them, or billions of dollars to them a year for secondary education, and I don't think they handle their money quite as well as they should. And going to a private university, Drake Des Moines, I think private universities do a great job of handling their money well. And I support the Iowa tuition grant, which helps Iowa West down here, which is a huge factor of the economy down here. And I think the Board of Regents needs to get their stuff under control, and the legislature needs to make sure they're held more accountable for what they do.
So that concludes the policy questions. We'll stop it just a little bit early, give you each about 3 minutes to respond to this sort of closing question. And that is, you're vying to work for these voters in Des Moines. So what will your main priority be as a member of the Iowa House of Representatives? And, because as former Governor Branstad stated, sometimes government is really about the art of the possible, what issue would you not ever compromise on? So, Joe, since you got the mic, you can start. Tell us your main priority and the one issue that you wouldn't ever see yourself compromising on.
So my number one priority of the legislature is just going to be to make sure we're passing bills for rural Iowans, for Mount Pleasant and the surrounding areas. And if there's a bill that comes across my desk that is going to It might be a pro-business bill, it might be a conservative bill, philosophical, but it's going to hurt the communities down here. I'm not going to vote for it because, I'm a rural Iowa first. I know Trump says America first, I'm rural Iowa first, and that's how I'm going to act when I'm a legislator. And I guess an issue that I would never compromise on would probably be abortion. I want to compromise my beliefs on believing that all life's precious and that we need to make sure we're protecting our babies.
Well, I think it's been pretty clear here today that my number one issue is going to be healthcare. I do think that there is a lot of solutions that can be had within the state for the administration and the efficiency of running the healthcare system. I think there's a lot of bipartisan support that can come together, and I think healthcare is definitely an issue that touches every single person in this district, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. So I do think that the privatization system can be fixed with a little work and some compromise. I also think that we need to continue working towards more affordable health plans for individuals, as well as small businesses that are trying to do the right thing and provide health care to their employees. I'm gonna agree with Joe. The one thing that I would not compromise on is the abortion issue. I understand that this issue brings a lot of passion on both sides, but for me, it is it's a moral belief and a moral-based question. And my moral compass tells me that life begins at conception. I think that a lot of people are concerned about the heartbeat bill that was passed, that it's going to throw Iowa into a long litigative process. But again, I think that Iowa is first in a lot of things. And I think that the state legislature was right to support this bill. And I think that it's something that's worth fighting for.
So I have quite a bit on my agenda that I want to accomplish, and main priorities. The first and foremost is to actually represent you. I'm big on community engagement, listening to the individual. The communities are everything. And we need to, Mount Pleasant is important, but look at Salem, Wayland, Brighton, New London, Crawfordsville, and all these other areas. They deserve just as much representation. You got spirited individuals out there who have opinions, who want to get them across to you. So just get out there and listen. I'm big on juvenile justice reform. That needs to have some serious thought and action. We've talked about action for the past 4 years. Now's the time for action. Balanced budget, we also have to look at and make sure that everything we do is a balanced budget ends well. But some things I will never compromise on. This is a solid promise. This is our gun rights, our Second Amendment. There's absolutely, every single day it's being attacked, day after day. And they come up with all these statistics. No, guns don't kill people. People are the problem. We have a moral problem here. You have to get into schools and actually teach the kid right from wrong. I know it used to be the parents' job, but I guess somewhere along the line it's failing. We also need to look at mental health, give them the attention that they need, and just encourage more communication with law enforcement. With that being said, I agree with my colleagues here. Abortion too is I'm staunch pro-life. Life does begin at conception. We need to treat it that way. The final thing I want to say is just listen to the people, take their thoughts into consideration into the decision-making process, govern with them in mind. Everything that I do, either through the lens of a middle-class family. Is this needed? Will it benefit the individual? If it doesn't meet those two questions, if it's not needed, if it doesn't benefit the individual, well then I see no reason why we should be addressing it. So if you want to take one thing away from this today, remember I'm pro-gun and pro-life.
So my campaign is based on freedom and opportunity, and my priorities are reduce taxes, reduce regulations, and reduce spending. And that is all coming from a constitutional perspective, and I believe taking that constitutional perspective, which encourages freedom and less government, and leaving that to individuals, will be a better solution to any problems and situations that come up. All wrapped into my Christian faith, because that's paramount for me. And having said all that, what I would not compromise on is raising taxes. I have signed a tax pledge. I'm very proud of that. I will not, no matter what, raise any taxes, especially if it's not revenue neutral. Number two, and I don't want to sound like an echo, because people who know me know that I'm very pro-life. And that is also a second part as well.
Okay, well, I thank everyone for being here. Before I give up the mic, I'll remind you all that tomorrow is Mother's Day. So whether it be your mother or a mother who is in your life, if cards or brunch or gifts or anything else are warranted, there's your warning. So otherwise, we'll close by giving these folks a round of applause for being here.